if there's one man who can really quite literally see into the future, it is the great Mike Benz. Mike Benz is somebody who has, on this program, predicted the future time and time again. He predicted the Trump victory, but with certain guardrails, right? And one of those guardrails is going to be don't bash too hard into the deep state. Has that rail gone out the window? Or is it Washington, D.C. deep staters that will be run out of D.C. on a rail? We're not sure. But joining us now, live now, the great Mike Benz can answer these questions. Oh, Mike. This is our first time chatting since the Great Awakening of this nation. And look at that smile. I've never seen Mike Benz smile like that. You look like you're Joe Biden meeting Trump at the White House.
I look like I'm Joe Biden giving his resignation speech, actually. I've never seen Joe Biden smile that hard as the day Donald Trump defeated Kamala Harris.
You, among all men, would know probably more about the demonic freakout that is currently happening inside of our federal government institutions, specifically given the Matt Gaetz selection. Tulsi pissed him off. Pete Hegseth got him frustrated. But this Matt Gaetz decision has really sent them into the psych ward. Can you explain why?
I actually, we have the element of surprise. I think this was so shocking to them. It's shocking, frankly, to me, and I think even to the Trump base, who could only pick Matt Gaetz in a sort of fantasy draft. It's like the star player that everybody would sort of want in there, but you think, there's no way our team is going to get him. So we'll settle for something less based than Gaetz. So I'm still in a little bit of shock over it. And I think that the screams that we're starting to hear are frankly just the beginning of what is going to become an unbelievable campaign over the next 6 weeks. Frankly, and this is going to sound a little strange, but frankly, I don't want to say wish, but it may have been shrewder to have floated a more blob-like attorney general for 6 weeks, promising Gaetz on the back end this was going to happen, and then doing a last-minute switcheroo, because my concern is there is going to be a Dante's Inferno sized fire cloud rising out of the block of the DOJ building in Washington, just a few streets down from the Capitol building, because they are not going to allow a single book to remain intact with someone like Matt Gaetz there. I would not be surprised if ethics probes are crisis launched, if there's a promise for second, third, and fourth houses, as well as yachts and paid for private education for various pivot members of the Senate in order to block the confirmation. There is going to be a campaign like holy hell that will be raised against Gaetz, because this is probably the most powerful position in the cabinet, insofar as every other federal agency depends on the Justice Department's enforcement and the Justice Department's consent. And Gaetz is totally based, and he will be unleashed without mercy on corruption. So I think that this is such an incredible Thor hammer blow to the corrupt dark heart of the blob, that the next 24 hours, 48 hours, they're actually just going to be processing before they recoil and launch their counterattack. So we have about 24, 48 hours of champagne on this, I think, before it starts to get weird.
So this decision is obviously striking at the heart of President Trump being backstabbed by many of the people he chose and selected in the first term, and choosing somebody who he pretty much has a neural link with in Matt Gaetz. They actually have the same superhero origin story and the same crisis when you have federal agencies coming after both of them, lying, deceiving, doing illegal tactics to try and destroy them. And Matt Gaetz has been such a strong ally against institutionalism. And so you see this horror, and I think it's a genius move because, one, a lot of bureaucrats, just on the prospect of Gaetz being their boss will self-deport. I do firmly believe that. You're already seeing these reports out of Politico saying they're burning the freaking ships right now on just the auspices of this potentially happening. And now you're seeing a lot of reporting out of the Senate saying we don't have the will to fight this. If this is Trump's selection, what are we going to do? And so, Mike, what process could there possibly be to, I guess, prevent Matt Gaetz from getting the chair? And then what should Matt Gaetz do first when he gets it?
Well, I hope you're right on that. I saw a strange quote from Lindsey Graham as this was coming down, where Lindsey Graham expressed reticence about approving Matt Gaetz through the Senate, and Lindsey Graham voted to approve Merrick Garland. So that
they all did.
I mean,
they all did. Merrick Garland got 70 votes. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. But the Republicans who approved Merrick Garland may not approve the Republican Matt Gaetz because they're in on it. But, another thing that's quite sort of troubling in the mix, it's for the most part, I've been doing, double backflip cartwheels like a 13-year-old gymnast, at some of these picks. But the fact is it is all very complicated by the John Thune appointment as Senate Majority Leader.
Yes.
That is an incredibly powerful position. The Senate Majority Leader is going to determine all of the committee assignments, which means all the other senators, in order to have a blossoming career in the Senate, are going to have to do favors for John Thune. John Thune has quite a checkered relationship, I would say, with one foot. Well, I mean, I wouldn't even say it's 1 foot in MAGA world and 1 foot in Rhino world. It's, for the most part, he is totally aligned with the blob, totally aligned with the establishment. I presume that this was basically Senate maneuverings that I doubt that the Trump inner circle gave the blessing to, but simply did not have the muscle, not being in power yet, that they got him in an emergency vote.
Yeah.
I mean, they expedited the process just to make this happen, and that will give the Senate the ability. I mean, there's only a 3-vote majority in the Senate to vis-a-vis the Democrats. I mean, does anyone think Mitt Romney is going to be approving this? All they need are 3 swing votes to hold all of this beautiful early Christmas up. And the fact is given who the Republicans nominated as the Senate Majority Leader, they probably could, and very well may intend to, which will be a sort of delayed October surprise. We may have a January surprise, but this could all be circumvented if we could get the recess appointments that Elon Musk, that Thomas Massie, that Donald Trump are all pushing for. But that's going to be another fight in the legislature in order to sort of realize the big beautiful dreams that we are now starting to dream.
So what would be your big beautiful dream for Matt Gaetz if he is to get the chair here? Well,
we've had the 4 most corrupt years of the Department of Justice in our country's history. This is a period that effectively has to be purged from institutional memory in the United States, because it was a full frontal assault on the entirety of the U.S. Constitution. You had, for example, on the prosecution space, the prosecutions of Donald Trump were the first time in our nation's history the Justice Department has ever targeted a president. The first time they ever sent the FBI to raid someone's home. The first time they ever put them through an indictment process. The first time they ever sought prison for in an indictment. The first time they even worked with the states. If folks remember, the Justice Department sent their number 3 to the New York Attorney General's office, to the New York District Attorney's office, in order to help the federal Justice Department prosecute Donald Trump at the state level. Then you have all of the crimes and cover-ups around the January 6th prosecutions. The January 6th Fedsurrection was a total cover-up job, top to bottom, by this Justice Department. Everyone knows the reason that the FBI has not updated their public video file list. They said they had 39,000 video files on the pipe bomber. They altered the footage that they uploaded. They knocked it down to 1 frame per second. They cut the pipe bomber out right before the actual planting of the bomb. Unbelievable what they did there. And then not a single hair follicle disclosed, not a single skin cell from walking around the home court territory of the national security state on foot for 90 minutes, placing phone calls directly from the scene of the crime. We now have reporting from John Solomon's Just the News today, as well as from Congress, that it appears that there actually was cell phone data that was recoverable from the telecom companies of the text messages and phone activity of the pipe bomber. And the Justice Department simply lied and said that those files were corrupted. Mark my words, there's only one reason they have stopped the pipe bomber investigation, and that is because the pipe bomber is a Fed, or the pipe bomber was working with Feds, and they don't want to investigate or have a public prosecution because that would reveal the Fed network that effectuated the pipe bomb fraud. And imagine if Matt Gaetz is unleashed on that. Imagine the size of the scandal when it's publicly discovered that it was actually a federal informant or federal agent or a member of the U.S. military operating in a special deniable operation in tandem with the Justice Department or in tandem with DHS or the FBI, who was responsible for the threat of the mass casualty event on January 6th, whose discovery preceded the breach by 1 minute. 1 minute after the pipe bombs were discovered at the RNC, the perimeter was breached on January 6th. This is why the Capitol chief at the time, Stephen Sund, his explanation was that the pipe bombs were effectively a decoy in order to divert the Capitol Police and DC Metropolitan Police resources to the actual threat, a mass casualty event, which, by the way, somehow the DC Fusion Cell, run by DHS, had apparently 3 days advance notice of. Insofar as they literally called all of the hospitals around DC and said, stock up on extra blood because we're expecting a potential mass casualty event. And then somehow the acting Attorney General, Jeffrey Rosen, was 3 days before, that same day, January 3rd, 2017, had ran a special exercise involving the DHS as well as military folks and FBI folks from Quantico, because they were expecting what they said a potential weapon of mass destruction at the Capitol on January 6th. Well, you know what the technical term for a pipe bomb is in Justice Department parlance? It's a weapon of mass destruction. That is what the Whitmer Fed-napping plot folks were convicted of. So how did they know? How did the Justice Department know? Well, the fact is if you see smoke tonight lighting up your sunset, if you live in the DMV area, those are the files of January 6th. Those are the iDrives of the pipe bomber investigation lighting up the night sky. So there's going to be, there's going to be marshmallows and barbecue that the whole city will be able to stick a marshmallow out your window, and you will be able to have what's left of the January 6th files of the Justice Department tonight.
I can't see a world where Trump wouldn't, let's say the Gaetz appointment gets fraught. Okay, worst case scenario. I can't see a world where Trump would appoint somebody who wouldn't do that, who wouldn't do the disclosures. So much of President Trump, his own personal interviews and then the interviews of people close to him, have been about disclosure and transparency. There's DNA on the cocaine found at the White House, Mike. There's DNA on it. Somebody was shoving their nose inside the cocaine. So you've been to the White House. You worked in the White House. I've been to the White House. You don't walk in the White House with cocaine. It's actually impossible unless you're like a family member.
Well, unless you're on cocaine.
Well, yeah, I mean, sure. So it's like they know, bro. Like they have it at Quantico. They know whose it was. They have DNA inside the cocaine. I can't imagine a world where President Trump doesn't just begin declassifying and releasing this information to the American people. And then the question that remains is, will there ever be any credibility? The credibility that will then be gone, right? The moment that you find out that the pipe bomber was a Fed, then all credibility for the Justice Department, the FBI, DHS, everybody, Homeland Security, Special Investigations, all these people, it's gone. It atomizes. In that moment, the moment somebody walks to a dais with a federal logo on it and says the pipe bomber was one of us, it's gone. It's atomizes, right? It is the Manhattan Project event. And then you must be. I guess the next question is, what happens after that? Because I think that's going to happen, Mike. I can't see a world where it doesn't.
Well, if all the evidence is destroyed, I mean, what do you think all of the prosecutors and assistant prosecutors and third-party contractors are doing tonight? You think they're going to happy hour at 5 p.m. if they've been working the pipe bomber investigation, or do you think they're doing the marshmallow party? I think we all know the answer to that, and I think that they are going to make a strategic calculus.
Data's never fully gone, man. The data's never fully gone. I don't know.
Well,
man.
the FBI has a lot of tricks on this. If folks are familiar with the famous iDrive and the ability to simply shift files into a sort of temporary database that then evaporates. They've done this many, many times. It's why I always say the FBI is where evidence goes to die. They have one very special skill, which is destroying evidence. Have you ever wondered why it is there were 23 video cameras around the Oklahoma City FBI building in 1995, and you've never seen footage of the Oklahoma City bombing explosion? You've seen the after picture taken by third-party reporters. Well, when Jesse Trentadue brought that case against the Justice Department, they claimed all 23 of the cameras magically malfunctioned, and they were moved over into a secret iDrive that automatically deleted the remaining footage. The same thing with the malfunctioning of the tapes, for example, with the Jeffrey Epstein story, the same thing. I mean, there's so many examples of this. It's crazy. If folks want to watch a great documentary by CNN on Whitey Bulger, the famous head of the mafia in Boston, who was revealed to be an FBI informant the whole time, which was why he was allowed for 30 years to run the entire organized criminal network in Boston, the FBI actually kept two separate sets of records. One which had his crime sheet, and this is the one they disclosed to Congress. And then 30 years later, it turned out that the actual special agent in charge of the Boston FBI field office had the same document they gave to Congress, but with an addendum at the end about all of his federal informant status and everything that he had done there. So this is like an Enron-style accounting fraud, where they keep multiple sets of books and they can hand one to one person or to the inspector general or to Congress, and they can say, these are our files, and they look like files. But the fact is the people who are in the small compartmentalized top secret, above top secret, TSSCI class, they will have the actual files with all their dirty little deeds. And those are the ones I suspect that will be lighting up the night sky in D.C. I will say one other thing, which is that I hope that you're right about the loss of credibility that should come from the public disclosure of the sheer scale and magnitude of the January 6th Fedsurrection, potentially the Epstein investigation, which the previous attorney general happened to have a very direct connection with, given that Bill Barr was effectively family friends with the Epstein family and had come up in his career by working directly at the CIA, being put through law school effectively by the CIA, and then being the CIA mop-up man for Iran-Contra and after. But the fact is, time does do strange things to let the air out of the whoopee cushion slowly. I mean, the fact is our new nominee for the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, I just posted this on my X timeline today, was publicly saying that Russia bombed their own pipeline, the Nord Stream pipeline, as those events were happening. Now, Marco Rubio was the chairman at the time of the Senate Intelligence Committee. He oversaw the CIA. He was also on the board of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee overseeing the State Department. But so he surely knew what the CIA records were around the Nord Stream pipeline. We now know, thanks to not just the German the German national police that disclosed the Ukrainian diving teams that blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. But we now know that the CIA had at least advanced knowledge, because the formal story now told by the CIA to the New York Times is that we knew the Ukrainians were going to blow up the Nord Stream pipeline. We tried to stop them by sending a message to a general, but the general didn't deliver it to the diving teams. So Marco Rubio knew that it wasn't the Russians. Marco Rubio knew it was us. That should be a massive scandal. The fact is time does strange things. If that had happened in the moment, if the week after, or 6 months after, or a year after even, that New York Times article had come out, that German police investigation with the indictments had come out, that would have been a massive scandal. But 3 years later, 4 years later, things sort of
mellow out.
Puff.
Yeah,
exactly you have to catch them in the act.
Most people wouldn't even be able to tell you what Nord Stream is. It was the hottest topic for a good month. That's what everyone talked about. But right now, people would say, what? I can't even remember that. Yeah, it's true. Okay, so speaking of disappearing things from the internet, Mike, I got to ask you about censorship. This has got to be, I mean, the censorship industry has got to be considering, like, checking itself in for suicide watch at this point. There's no way, can you talk me through that landscape right now? You're hearing a lot of saber rattling from incoming administration, being staffed by guys like Elon Musk, about government-funded censorship regime. Where do they stand right now?
Cornered dogs do desperate things. And what you're going to see is actually an attempt to upscale the censorship by tapping into very, very dark sources to do it. So I'm expecting a twofold strategy in the months and years ahead. Internally within the U.S., you are going to see states attempt to do what was previously attempted to do by individual federal agencies. So I expect to see the states of California, Illinois, New York, Washington, Oregon pass a flurry of state-level legislation simulated after this, sort of AI. If folks remember, the state of California attempt to make it a crime to post a meme that had AI satire around elections. You're going to see already California has passed what they called, transparency and accountability laws for social media in order to get internal access so that they can do disinformation monitoring and to flag to the state effectively hate speech incidents so that there can be a real-time monitor on those sorts of things. Basically, they're going to, and combined with other initiatives around digital resilience, media literacy, information integrity, in order to make those states inhospitable, or effectively make that information inaccessible in those states. For example, the mandatory media literacy laws passed in California, Illinois, and New York last year make it mandatory in K through 12 school for all students in all public schools to go through these mental brainwashing courses where they're told that they are not allowed to cite Breitbart News, they're not allowed to cite the Benny Johnson Show, they're not allowed to cite OAN or Tim Pool or you name it, because those are low credibility news sources. And so you need to report to the teacher what news sources you're going to cite in advance. It's not about literacy, can you read or not? It's about, are you reading the right sources of media? So that is now already mandatory in those states by law. And what you're going to see is an upscale of the infrastructure on top of that in order to effectively pick a market winner in the social media space. That may be, for example, something like Mark Zuckerberg's Threads, or it could be something like Blue Sky, the Twitter alternative, or it could be, it could just be simply YouTube style, confines. They will try to find a market champion who censors the Trump movement, who censors the populist movement, who censors the Elon Musk network, and make that the only thing accessible on public Wi-Fi, make that the only thing that in a public institution you are allowed to cite or refer to as evidence in research papers. You're going to see all those little tricks on the inside. But most significantly, they are going to go straight to Downing Street. They're going to go straight to the UK Foreign Office. and they will run back on steroids the operation they ran after Trump won because of social media the first time in 2016. This is what I always call the transatlantic flank attack. I'm telling you right now, there's going to be an international roadshow. The people who are at the State Department right now, the people who have been coordinating this worldwide orchestra of censorship laws in the EU, in Brazil, in Australia, they are not going to be going into early retirement. They are going to take their special set of skills, which is back-channeling deals with foreign diplomats in order to implement foreign laws to impact U.S. companies and U.S. individuals and U.S. political movements. And they are going to be cutting deals. They will be using George Soros money for that. You'll be using the whole influence, DNC money machine, and they will be doing shadow diplomacy with Europe, with Latin America, with Australia, with Central Asia. They are going to try to balkanize the planet, and they will impose exactly the kind of penalties on X and on Facebook if Zuckerberg decides to free the Meta. You see what in the EU, the punishment for not complying with their disinformation laws under this new NATO censorship law is not just 6% of revenue coming from the EU. It's 6% of global revenue for X. So every dollar of premium that's sold here in the US, every ad sale that X generates as revenue here in the US or in Tunisia or in Zanzibar or in Colombia or on the moon, if Elon is able to establish this is an interplanetary fine essentially, and 6% of it, that is absolutely massive. That's approximately the average profit margin of a blue chip company. So it will be bankrupting if that is enforced. And the only thing that can stop that is Senator Marco Rubio, now going to be Secretary of State Marco Rubio. And then Australia is now this week voting on their misinformation law. Oh, the model legislation for that, by the way, was written by First Draft, which is the technical implementer of the State Department's primary censorship program. So effectively, the U.S. State Department set up Australia's misinformation law. I should note it gives godlike powers to their Australian e-safety commissioner, who publicly bragged that she was recruited to be a CIA operations officer right out of college. So you have an American CIA track head of censorship in Australia, and an Australian censorship law that was effectively written, the model legislation for it was written by the technical implementer of the CEPS program, the main censorship program at state. So we've simply parasited the parliament of Australia, and that penalty imposes a 5% global revenue fine on X if they don't comply. 5% from Australia, 6% from the EU. They're going to try to stack up an Alex Jones style judgment in regulatory fines against X that they effectively, that the Onion can buy X because of how deep in debt it will be. And this will be back channeled by the shadow diplomats at state and aid and the National Security Council, the whole blob foreign policy establishment of the Obama, Biden, Harris lineage. So that is a major, major thing to watch for. And Marco Rubio has a lot of work to do in order to combat that.
In closing here, how do you combat that? Because, of course, that is clearly an existential threat to what brought us to this moment. A corner dog is very, very dangerous. Yet, if put to heel, that dog will eventually behave. I hear J.D. Vance, the clip of J.D. Vance saying, why would we be in a NATO partnership with people who are against our Constitution? That's antithetical to being in a military partnership with somebody if they stand against your core values, including your First Amendment. So that seems like a pressure point that could be easily operable.
Major one. The fact is free speech diplomacy has been at the bedrock of our diplomatic and intelligence and statecraft toolkit for now coming up on 80 years. We have long used the carrots and sticks of the American empire to influence the domestic legislation of foreign countries to make them more consistent with American values. For example, on the carrot side, there is $50 billion worth of aid that is distributed every year by USAID. That goes to Brazil. We spent $220 million giving aid to Brazil. Well, take that away day one until their misinformation laws are torn down and the TSE censorship court has its disinformation task force disbanded. Then you have trade. You have billions of dollars in trade. You have tariffs. You can do it by industry. You can do it by energy. There are all sorts of things that you can log roll in order to make them wealthier and improve their economic development by deepening ties if they get rid of the speech restrictions. And there are all sorts of ways to apply sticks, such as through sanctions, such as through renegotiation of existing treaties, existing trade agreements. I would say you may even go farther than such things as participation in NATO, unless the EU Digital Services Act removes its disinformation compliance, which, by the way, should be the day one negotiating posture of the White House, of the Defense Department, of the State Department, of USAID, of the intelligence services, because it's way more important for us to be in NATO to them than for them to maintain this barely a year old in terms of its operation disinformation compliance component of a EU regulatory law. These are major institutions who are afraid of major surgery. But it's not like the entire institution is corrupt in many of these cases. Oftentimes, it is just a rogue cell. It is a small part of it that started off as a cancer, in the earlobe, or a cancer, in some inflamed lymph node in an armpit, but it's turned into a cancer that is metastasized into the brain and the lungs. But if you can effectively cut deals that say, listen, we will forestall major surgery if you simply cut out, but ruthlessly and completely, these rogue cells, you will be able to apply an incredible amount of leverage to get this stuff shut down. You also need to defund it completely. And I am honored, privileged, and delighted to say that late next week, I will be releasing a comprehensive list of every single government agency and every single government program, initiative, and task force within every government department that has an ongoing in-process role in internet censorship. And this White House or policymakers or interested citizens can use that as effectively a treasure map for every single dollar that can be cut to dismantle this, because they say that this is hearts and minds work, convincing foreign governments to pass internal censorship legislation, but it's hearts and minds and cash. You take the cash out, they have far less carrots and sticks to offer those governments. And this White House will be in the dominant slot to be able to combat the shadow government.
That's clearly what's been operating the country for the last couple decades. It's clearly what Barack Obama just engaged in. Pelosi's engaging in it right now. I think McConnell's engaging in it in the Senate, where the leaders step back and then operate the entire institutions from the shadows. And it's antithetical to democracy, and it has to end. We must cut it out, root and stem. Mike Benz is one of those guys who, cuts with a scalpel and then with a cleaver. And we're very excited to see what he does in the next couple of years against his arch enemy, the censorship industrial complex. One of the few guys who's actually spoken out against this and actually brought it to the forefront of the nation and to the forefront of the minds of those in charge of the Trump administration right now. And we know that they're listening to Mike. You should too.